There was an article that says woman sleeps in cage to live to 150. That was about me, but I sleep in this Faraday cage, so it actually blocks the EMS from entering my bed.
What would be your non-negotiables in your house?
I definitely think sauna is a game changer, and there's two great times to do sauna. So either after exercise to increase the exercise benefit, or you can do it before sleep for about 1 to 2 hours prior to sleep.
What are the 3 daily habits that all women should be doing?
Trying to reduce toxin exposure. So it's estimated that women leave the home with about double the amount of toxins as men. That is mostly in the form of personal care products. I would say stress management is probably the first, actually. And then the third, I would say, is sleep.
What does a typical day look like for you?
But I go to bed at 8. I wake up naturally, typically around 5. The first thing I do is my oral care routines. And I immediately get sun. My husband and I go on a walk every single day. Because if we wake up and we just start looking at our phones immediately, then we're going to be derailed by every single thing that happens.
What does your supplement stack look like?
I take about 35 supplements. So I have my foundational supplements, magnesium in there. I use 7 different forms. Then we have omegas and then a vitamin D. And then I think of my protocol supplements. So those are all customized only to me based on my labs.
And obviously you have all these routines, but how do you adjust these around your cycle?
Cycle syncing would essentially be building your exercise routine around your menstrual cycle. So we have an increase in estrogen in the follicular phase, where the idea is that we can recover faster, perform better. And then we have luteal phase, we can get more fatigued. So there's 2 ways to think about this. Number 1, hi, everyone listening to the Polymath podcast. This is Kayla Barnes-Lentz. I am here in Australia, actually, on a speaking tour. So we thought that we would do a really special episode today for all of you. This is definitely going to be health focused, but we're going to be sharing one of my recent talks that is literally jam-packed with information on longevity, health optimization, life extension, peptides, so many of the questions that we've gotten from you guys for the podcast recording. So today, that's going to be our episode. And Harper and I cannot wait to see you next week back in the studio. So I hope that you enjoy it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever live podcast. For those of you who don't know, I'm Natalie.
And I'm Coral.
And we're hosts of the Raise podcast. We are so excited to be joined today by Kayla Barnes-Lentz, and we're going to be talking about all things female health, biohacking, and longevity. So let's go.
Kayla, thank you so much for being here with us today. First of all, how did you actually get into biohacking, and what inspired you to start optimizing your health this way?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here. It was a slow build, so I didn't just overnight, start sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber or anything. So I started studying nutrition in college, which was great. Then I got super interested in the brain, so I started to train under Dr. Daniel Amen's brain health practitioner. That's where I first learned about HBOT, actually. Did integrative nutrition schooling, Institute for Integrative Health Practitioner. And I was really doing all this stuff just to upgrade my own health. So, I became an entrepreneur at 17. I had no clue what I was doing then, just saying yes to everything. And I knew that if I wanted to be able to perform as well as I would need to build a business, something successful, I would need to upgrade my biology. So started to play around with nutrition and then got really into exercise programming. And then I would fly all over the country to find some of these really, at the time, weird modalities. So like an ozone sauna or, different types of chambers or, blood therapies, things of that nature. So it was a slow build, but I got really interested in all of this when I went to go open up my own medical longevity clinic. So obviously, when you're opening a business like this, you have to determine what labs you're going to offer, what therapies, what medical providers you will hire, and what type of medicine you'll practice. So I got access to thousands of labs nearly overnight, and I realized that my doctors had never recommended, a gut test or a biological age test or an advanced toxin test, or any of the labs I do now had really never been recommended to me. So it was a big light bulb moment, and I thought, okay, this is amazing. I have a bit of a type A personality, and I saw that there was areas to improve, and I just went all in on that, became totally obsessed. And then I, owned and operated that clinic for 6.5, almost 7 years. And so I got to see so many incredible firsthand accounts because as it relates to these biohacking therapies, some of them, of course, many of them actually don't have randomized control trials. So it was really great to experience firsthand thousands of individuals having significant benefits for a lot of the different things that we'll talk about today. So
Amazing. And can you explain to everyone why it's so important for women to approach biohacking differently to men?
Yeah, I mean, this has obviously been a very male dominated industry, which I love and am so appreciative of. But I think that we're finally at a point where it's very clear that there are biological and physiological differences that women have, and that dictates our protocols, right? So when I first decided to put out my labs, and by the way, I've been putting out labs for, 6 plus years. But when I decided to put it together in an organized format, I also decided to hire a small team of female PhD candidates, one of which is in the audience, and helped to gather all of the female literature, which was incredible. But I also put together some of the most gold, let's say gold standard science backed disciplinaries for longevity. So I put in caloric restriction, right? So we know caloric restriction in mice, it's one of the only things that we know to really extend lifespan. So 20 to 30% caloric restriction yields about a 20 to 30% increase lifespan in first worms and then these mice. So I implemented that into my protocol. And as a woman, I watched my thyroid levels decline. I watched my hormones become dysregulated. And that was where I had to take a moment and stop and say, okay, I think we need to redesign this. So as I got into all my N of one data, and we can talk about this, but I literally measure everything. I measure my hormones every morning. I have an Aura ring. I have a Whoop. I have an Eat Sleep. So I have 3 different trackers just for sleep. I do grip strength. I do lung health testing. I do, of course, body composition. I do gut health testing, thyroid, bioage, Grail liquid biopsies. We do genetic tests, all the whole 9 yards, and we can get into it if you guys are all interested in what tests I do, when, and why. Um, but yeah, it was very clear to me that there was nuance in every single area, even of baseline optimization. So when we think about exercise, when we think about sleep, and we can go into the details here, nutrition, all of those core principles, even socialization, how women socialize versus how men socialize, there are differences. So I think it's really exciting time that we are focusing on that, and us women can have our own, optimization protocols. But I will say for all the men in the audience, everything that we'll talk about today can be applicable to both sexes. It's just what's the dose, what's the timing, and what's that exact protocol?
Okay. Amazing. So, can you actually break down your daily protocol for us? What does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, well, it's a lot, so we'll get into it. I wake up, well, first of all, let's start with the day prior. So I go to bed at 8 o'clock p.m. every single day. Really important to optimize your circadian rhythm. We all know the light, the sun, the evening sunlight, but I go to bed at 8. I wake up naturally, typically around 5. The first thing I do is my oral care routine. So we now know there's a big correlation between our oral health and more oral microbiome, things like cardiovascular disease, even neurodegenerative diseases. So I do a test 4 times a year. It's called Bristle. It's an oral microbiome test. So just like we do our gut microbiome, we also have a vaginal microbiome. We have an oral microbiome, a skin microbiome. So oral microbiome super important. So I do a little bit of ozone oil pulling in the morning. I do, of course, the teeth brushing. I do the flossing, and then I also have a little device. It has a blue light that you can do teeth whitening, and then it has a red light that can actually reduce inflammation in the gums. So do my oral care routine. This is before the sun comes up. So then I head over to my desk. Have a post on this on Instagram if anyone wants to see, but it is very optimized for health, I would say. So I have a pulse PEMF device on my chair. I have a red light next to my desk, and then I have a NanoV, which is a German device. It's actually shown to improve VO2 max, reduce oxidative stress, which we know is one of the root causes of aging, and improve protein folding. So there's me on my little desk with my nasal cannula, my red light on my PEMF, and I do my meditation. I do some prayer at that time, but I'm really trying to set my mind before the day sets it for me. Because if we wake up and we just start looking at our phones immediately, then we're going to be derailed by every single thing that happens. Not only is it a negative for your nervous system, but it's also going to derail your day. So do that. Then I immediately get sun. My husband and I go on a walk every single day as soon as the sun peaks. So I get sun, nature. I live in like a very quiet, peaceful neighborhood with horses. So again, not only getting my steps, which I'm going to be aiming for about 15,000 a day. 10,000 is great. 8,000 is really the minimum for getting those longevity benefits. But personally, I like about 15. So do my morning walk. Then I immediately jump into my training protocols. And I would encourage everyone, when you're thinking about your longevity training protocols, we got to think through what are the areas of health that are going to decline as we age, right? So we have to think about our cardiovascular system. So we first get those steps in, but also I do one longer run, and then I do two VO2 max training sessions. Really fun little experiment that I did. It was on Aura Ring. If anyone's seen that cardiovascular age, So I was able to take my cardiovascular age from -6.5 to -11.5 over the course of 6 months by incorporating VO2 max training. VO2 max training, a great way to do it is a Norwegian 4x4. So that's 4 minutes of about 90 to 95% max heart rate. And then that's followed by 4 minutes of recovery. For women, I think it's slightly better to do a 4x6. So 4 minutes of all out and then followed by 6 minutes of recovery. So do my training sessions. I also lift or do strength training about 5 times per week. So for men and women, like muscle is the organ of longevity. For women, I always say it's like a metabolic Spanx, right? So it's picking up that glucose, it's utilizing your insulin, super, super important and helpful for metabolic health. So strength training is definitely one. I'm also thinking about bones, so bone density. Women in particular, osteoporosis, especially when you get to perimenopause and menopause, can really start to set in. And in the States, a DEXA scan is not covered until the age of 65, which is far, far too late. I mean, I think if you're 30, go ahead and get a DEXA scan. Understand your bone density now because we know that our bone density peaks at 30 and then will start to decline every year after that. And men as well, we have to be prioritizing bone health. So that looks like jumping, box jumping. It looks like, of course, lifting heavy, but really loading those bones. There's also, if you have less mobility, I have a power plate that can be pretty good for also improving bone density a bit. So we have the VO2 max, cardiovascular, we have the strength training, and then stretching and mobility. These are often forgot, but as we get older, we become less flexible, we lose our mobility, and we also become unstable. So working on balance as well. So that's how I think about my protocols. I train, 7 days a week, but some of it's easier than others. And then right after that, I love to jump in the sauna, which I'm very excited because my husband and I actually own a company, and we're going to be launching with health here in London. So it's called Heavenly Heat Saunas, and we ended up actually being the owners because I just wanted one. So something important, and you don't have to get our sauna, but with saunas, so if you're doing an infrared sauna, I started to dive deep into the literature. And if they're using wood glues and they're using varnishes and they're using polyurethanes, they're going to off gas into that chamber when heated. And that's really the last thing that you want is to be actually exposing yourself to toxins while detoxing. And then in the Heavenly Heat saunas, they're also Faraday shielded. So there was an article that says woman sleeps in cage to live to 150. I'm like, wow, okay. That was about me, but sleep in this Faraday cage. So it actually blocks the EMS from entering my bed. And we can talk about that in a second. But yeah, so then I do sauna, and there's two great times to do sauna. So either after exercise to further increase the exercise benefits or essentially enhance them, or you can do it before sleep for about 1 to 2 hours prior to sleep. That will actually increase your sleep. So I do my sauna protocol. Also, by the way, and this is obviously it sounds like a shameless plug now, but even before I was a sauna owner, I loved sauna because the data is so strong. So we know from the Finnish studies, which they were mostly done in men, but I'm excited for more female studies. 4 sessions of sauna per week can reduce the risk of dementia by 66%, reduce the risk of all cause mortality by up to 40%. It's an incredible, incredible longevity therapy, truly. You get the heat shock proteins, you get the increase in blood circulation, which is incredible for health, and you also get the detox benefits. So do that. Then I jump into a cold plunge. So I only do cold plunging for me in my follicular phase, which for women that stays about 1 through day 14 or so. And then I take my shower. I do my morning supplements. I take about 35 or so supplements. They're broken up. I have really early supplements that I skipped over, and then the majority of my supplements are with breakfast. So I have breakfast, and then I get into my first bout of work, actually. So do my
So
work.
this is all before you start work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Who else has a routine similar to this?
I was going to say mine's
Okay.
quite bad, but I think you
win.
take the crowd.
Well, a couple people raised their hand. But even if you just take, a couple little pieces out of it, I think, my routine's obviously super expensive, but it's my work and I'm obsessed with it. So then I get into my work. I do it in about 90-minute blocks. It's best for our rhythms for working. Our focus doesn't last much longer than that, even though I used to push through it all the time. I find now that if I do a 90-minute work block followed by a walk or even like a walking pad that I have in my office, really helps to refocus me. On my desk, I use the Nanovi again because if you want to do a lot of these devices, it obviously can take up your whole day, right? So I would encourage you to try to optimize an area like your bedroom as much as you can because you spend a lot of time there. And then my office, I spend a lot of time as well. So if I'm going to be sitting there, big bulk of the day, I want to be optimizing as well. I also have this chair. It's called an Anthros. It was made by doctors of physical therapy. So one of my protocols that I'm really going to work on this year is posture. So this chair, it's essentially completely customizable. So you are in perfect posture for the day. So that's quite helpful. Then I work, and I'll speed this up, guys, because I don't want this to be too laborious here. Then around 1 p.m., I do my hyperbaric oxygen therapy session. So for anyone that's interested in the protocol, I have a consulting medical doctor that is a expert in hyperbarics. So I'm doing two protocols. So I'm doing one protocol in the beginning of the year. This is called our body protocol. It's at 2.0 atmosphere, so it's a little bit deeper pressure. And then I do that for 40 sessions in the intervals of 1 hour per day. Um, 5 times per week. So it can produce a little bit of oxidative stress. So I was joking when I said I'm sleeping in a hyperbaric because that's actually not advised. So you do want to limit it. Some protocols do up to 90 minutes. I think one of the most hailed studies was actually 60 sessions at about 90-minute intervals with a 5-minute air break. But my physician decided to tailor that a bit to myself because I'm a little bit younger than the participants in the study. So that's where, medicine is so nuanced and longevity protocols are so nuanced. Although I'm going to talk a lot about females, it's really all about what does your data say? What is your own genetics? What do your genetics say? So you can tailor your program for everything that you do. And then what I think is, this medicine 4.0, we all have heard of medicine 3.0 from Peter Attia, which I think is amazing. But I think medicine 4.0 is that collaboration between you tracking at home and the collaboration with your physician. Because then we're not waiting once a year to get labs and then make interventions, right? You can see if your HRV is declining on a daily basis. If that becomes a pattern, you can literally make it an intervention much quicker if you're tracking some of your own data. Okay, HBOT. Then I do something called a Balancer Pro, which is a lymphatic drainage system, which I also have at the house. And then I start making dinner. So I am done eating by 4 p.m. every day. I do make all of our meals, which I enjoy, but we also know that cooking at home is one of the fastest ways to upgrade your health because you can know the oils that go into it, the ingredients. At restaurants, it's really difficult to know what they're putting in there. So make all my meals. I think we're going to talk about nutrition later. And then my day gets ready to wind down. So my husband and I go on another walk, which is nice for connection and just reflecting on the day together, socials, and then red lights go on, wind down time, breath work. One major tip for getting better sleep is get your resting heart rate as low as possible prior to going to bed. It's an absolute game changer.
So do you, as you said, you get your red lights on, do you go on your phone after it goes dark?
No,
Or do you,
about an hour before bed, no phone at all. I will glance on there. I'm not perfect at this all the time, but also Google red light phone blocker or red light phone trick, and it'll completely turn the phone red. So it's way better than even that, like oranges, because it's also so much less interesting to look at when it's like literally solid red. So yeah, and then bed at 8 o'clock. So that was my day. It's like basically the whole talk.
and you sleep on an 8 sleep, don't you?
Sorry
Sleep
about
on an 8 sleep, don't you? What else do you have
Yeah.
to go to bed?
Yeah, I sleep on an 8 sleep. Something interesting because, I really went back and forth. I think 8 sleep now is great, but I did do a lot of testing on the 8 sleep. So there is a bit of EMFs that are emitted, but it's all about where your body position is in terms of the device. So I have the device as far away as possible, and then I measure the EMF levels of where I'm actually sleeping in the bed. So yeah, I do use an 8 sleep. It's great. We have two air purifiers. Your environment means so much, right? So I measure the air quality in every single room in my house. I can tell you what the CO2 level is, the PM 2.5, PM 1.0, the light, the UVA, the UVB, the sound, all of it. There's a little device called Air Things, and I just pop them in each room and it feeds this back. But it's really important because it also measures radon, right? Radon can certainly contribute to things like lung cancer. So we need to make sure that we understand our environment. And I think too, we have to optimize again the places that we are the most. So in the bedroom, we have two air purifiers. The mattress is organic, but we do have the 8 sleep, and there's no televisions. We only use the bedroom for, two activities. That would be sleep and, making love, I believe is what I should say. So, yeah.
So I've seen one of your house tours on YouTube, and you literally have all the gadgets and all the biohacks. What would be your non-negotiables in your house?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss because I really strongly feel that we can get to 95 to 98% peak health with mastering the basics, things that a lot of individuals spoke about here today. So I want to be able to bring a lot of value to you guys and talk about other things. But exercise, sleep, social connection, nutrition, you can be in peak health with just mastering those, but you have to make it a discipline because doing it every now and then is not going to yield the results that you're going to be looking for. So outside of that, I definitely think sauna is a game changer. I do a test called the total toxic burden. I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years. I do it every quarter, and I can say with certainty that when I'm doing sauna consistently, so this test is actually combining three separate tests. So it's heavy metals, molds and mycotoxins, and then environmental toxins. So when I'm doing sauna consistently, I always have peak results. So in the top 1% lowest levels of total toxic burden. But when I had a time where I moved and didn't have my sauna, I literally saw those results increase. So I think sauna is one. I also think it's fairly accessible.
With
Not
the sauna, do you take binders? Like, what's your protocol?
Yeah, I think that should be very individualized with the medical providers, but I do like binders. I like a charcoal binder. You do want to make sure you take it 2 hours away from any medications or supplements and even food because it can bind to that. But it essentially can help to pull out some of those toxins in your body. So I love doing that, and I also do dry brushing in the sauna. So I love a little bit of a lymphatic dry brushing in there. And then our sauna also has a red light panel, so it's like a 5 foot red light panel that you can kind of habit stack. Like if we're going to do this stuff, we have to make it a little bit speedier. That's why I have one red light by my desk and then I have one red light in my sauna. So, yeah, that's the next one. And then outside of that, I think it's really tailored to what your goals are. So let's say you've ever had a TBI or a concussion of some nature. I think under medical guidance, maybe hyperbaric would be the best option for you. Let's say, you have some detoxification to work on. Things like lymphatic drainage can be the best. I mean, oxidative stress, something like a Nanovi can be really beneficial because we know oxidative stress is contributing to so many diseases. I also do what is called an oxidative stress panel. So I really encourage everyone not to just guess with these things because we want to be able to see the results. So if you check some labs and then you retest, then you'll know if it's efficacious for you or not.
Okay, so all of that was when you were at home. We all want to know, can I agree? What did you bring with you? We all want to know what is in Kayla Barnes' suitcase.
Yeah, we have quite a bit of stuff. But I think it's also a good test to see how flexible you are because if you get wiped out by traveling, I think that's a problem. I don't want to be that person. So I only slept 4.5 hours on the flight here. I immediately was able to regulate, but in my suitcase, so I pre-packed all my supplements. If anyone's seen my posts, I put them all into these little containers each week, so it's super easy. Pack that, pack sleep supplements. There's a little red light device that I love. It's called a Kineon. So it's it's a little bit of a stronger device, but you can use it as the proximal technique right on the neck. So it reduces inflammation, systemically just by being on the neck. But you can also use it, let's say on a knee, or it's made for joints. But I bring that. Love to bring a pulsetto. So stress is also another big protocol that I'm working on. We know that women and men, although the one-time biochemistry of a cortisol test are usually pretty much the same up until about age 40, but we know that physiologically women experience higher levels of stress. They also report higher levels of stress. And even from an N of one, I don't know if any husband and wives or boyfriends and girlfriends in the audience have, a whoop or an Oura ring. I see, even though my husband has a more stressful job than I do, lots more responsibility, this man is just restored like all the time. I'm like, I
See,
want,
you see, this is why you guys need to give us a break, okay?
yeah. So women, we have a lot going on. We really we think about a lot. When I ask my husband, I'm like, "Oh, you don't ever replay conversations that you had with someone in your mind?" And he's like, "Literally never." And I'm like, "Wow, must be great." So, yeah, stress. So I have this device called the Pulsetto. So vagal nerve stimulation. You can also do this through yodeling, which is free if you'd like to do that. Yeah, a little bit of singing can also
Can
stimulate.
you give us an example?
Yeah.
No, joking.
No demonstrations of my yodeling today, but yeah. So the cranial nerve or the vagus nerve, it helps to shift that sympathetic and parasympathetic arousal. We know that we are really in this like what's supposed to be fight or flight, right? But now we're in this sympathetic state all the time because emails and social media and comparison, and everybody has access to you all the time. So a device can physically shift you into that parasympathetic state, it's just kind of like a vibration, a frequency, and so I also travel with that. Travel with all my snacks. So this is a big question. Like, how do you eat healthy? First of all, I'm very grateful that the event put me in a hotel that has organic food. So thank you so much.
Which hotel was that? Not that we want to know you're staying, but
Oh yeah,
where sells organic food? Which hotel has organic food?
the one here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cafe Royal is
Oh,
the
they have.
yeah.
I didn't know they had
Yeah,
organic.
but there's a lot of options. There was also a dinner last night that was organic. If you ask, it's pretty nice here in London. So, but I also pack a lot of snacks. So I bring, glass bottled waters with me. You can get them through TSA if you tell them it's medical water. Might take you a bit longer, so prepare for about 10 minutes extra of time, but you can get it through. Needs to be unopened. But yeah, I'll bring all my snacks. I'll bring a bunch of water, and then as soon as I arrive, like I'll order Whole Foods or I'll plan ahead. So order all of my snacks. So we get blueberries and I get sardines and I get all these different foods that I'm gonna have here, greens, and then I just keep them in the room. So it just takes a little bit of preparation. Always make sure that there's a gym where you're staying so you can get your workouts. But I think also being flexible is a big test for me to see.
Yeah, how flexible are you with your protocol? I was wondering that.
If I'm traveling for work, I'm zero flexible.
Mm,
I don't have much flexibility. I really enjoy to just stick to it.
yeah.
But with travel, I definitely am forced to experience flexibility.
And when it comes to really optimizing female health, what are the three daily habits that all women should be doing?
Yeah. Well, I want to maybe take it back a step and think through, also some conditions that women can experience that men don't have to think about so much. So,
Yeah.
80% of autoimmune conditions are females. So, that's something we really need to be considering. Also, there's a variety of hormonal cascades that happen in a woman's life. We have our fertile years that we're in a time where we're really thinking and understanding that fertility is 50-50, right? So, could be the man, could be the woman, but women really have borne the bulk of, pressure on fertile years. So thinking about that stage of life, and then we enter perimenopause and then menopause. And during all these phases, we can have a bit of a different protocol. But for me, I think the top three things that women can do are trying to reduce toxin exposure. So it's estimated that women leave the home with about double the amount of toxins as men. That is mostly in the form of personal care products. So there's some great, there's the environmental working group that has the Skin Deep database. I would encourage you to just take a look, maybe scan a product that you have now and start to upgrade those over time. Doesn't have to be overnight, but reducing that toxic burden is really important. I would say stress management is definitely, maybe probably the first actually. I think about 80% of doctors' visits are related to stress. So we really have to keep that in check. And we just know that, women are experiencing higher levels of stress. And then the third, I would say, is sleep. I mean, sleep for both sexes is a game changer. One night of poor sleep can reduce your natural killer cells, which are helping to fight off cancer. It can increase your blood sugar, increase your heart rate, increase your hunger hormone ghrelin. So you're going to have a lot more cravings. You're not going to want to stick to your nutritional plan. So sleep is literally the foundation. I would encourage everybody to just build your life around sleep. So, like, no one thinks that they're having dinner with me, in my normal life anywhere past 4. They're not inviting me to events that are happening at 7 or 8. So, just shifting everything up a bit. And then you can really go to bed and feel super rested. So, those would be my top 3 tips.
Okay.
Okay, and obviously you have all these routines, but how do you adjust these around your cycle?
Yeah. So, there's interesting, the data is really conflicting. I'm going to be honest here. So, cycle syncing is having a huge moment right now. So, cycle syncing, for anyone that doesn't know in the audience, would essentially be building your exercise routine around your menstrual cycle. So, days one is the follicular, days 1 through about day 14 or so, or the follicular phase. Then you get into ovulation, like 14 through 16, and then you get into luteal phase. So, what's going on in a woman is this hormonal cascade. So, we have an increase in estrogen in the follicular phase, where the idea is that we can recover faster, perform better, maybe go a little bit more all out. Actually, during ovulation, we're supposed to be able to hit our highest PRs. And then we have luteal phase, which because progesterone increases and our basal body temperature also increases, we can get more fatigued. Progesterone's almost like the sleep hormone, right? So you should get better sleep at that time, but it can also make you a little bit more fatigued. So there's two ways to think about this. Number one, I think that you as a woman should actually be tracking your cycle because some women are also having in ovulatory cycles. So if you're not ovulating, then you're not hitting that luteal phase and you're just in more of an estrogen dominant state the whole time. So the way I think about this is I don't necessarily down regulate my programming on purpose because I think in terms of benefit consistency is everything. But if you feel fatigued or you are dealing with any sort of PMS symptoms, anything of that nature, you can certainly amend that. So maybe you program your hardest workouts, your highest lifts, in the first half of the cycle, and then you lighten up on the second half of the cycle. I do, however, change my cold plunging or these hormetic stressors. So, also as a woman, you really have to gauge how much stress you have right now because we're all unique and bio individual. So, my stress could be, let's say, super high, and many of you in the audience could have a lower stress. So, if you're tracking your stress and it's low, then you could be able to do harder workouts through the entire phase, or you could be doing cold plunging in these hormetic stressors. Hormetic stressors are the stressors that, like a sauna, cold plunge, they increase our resilience over time. They're good for us, but too many of them could be what tips our cup over. I think of everybody's health as a cup. So your genetics determine your size of your cup. Some people have bigger cups, some people have smaller cups. And then all of these behaviors. So sedentary lifestyle, we have poor nutrition, and then we have, potentially toxin exposure. That's what can tip your cup over and actually lead to those chronic diseases. So we all need to have an understanding of that. But there's also other things that you can do for female hormone optimization during different cycles. So sleep is a big area that I've noticed differences. So the literature states that women need about 11 minutes to 20 minutes more of sleep. But, I have found that I need about at least 40 minutes in the luteal phase more sleep than my husband and even more sleep than other stages of my cycle. So being able to track these things and feel okay, like we don't have to be part of the 5 a.m. club, during our luteal phase. We don't have to at all. Just build your schedule around what's going to benefit your health. And then with nutrition as well, we know that we are a little bit more insulin sensitive in the first half of the cycle. So we might process carbs a little bit better. We're a little less insulin sensitive in the second half of the cycle. Also, obviously, during the bleed phase, maybe you want to incorporate a little bit more iron rich foods. If you have checked your iron and it's low, many women do run an iron deficiency. So maybe incorporating some more, grass fed, grass finished red meats into that phase. So there's a lot of nuance in how we can do this as a woman. But those are some of the main areas.
I feel like balancing hormones is something that a lot of women struggle with. Is there anything that you do or take to help balance your hormones?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. There's great interventions like supplementation, but I think it's really important to test your hormones, not just guess, because we don't want to throw our hormones out of balance, right? So I think getting a really advanced hormone panel is step number one, and then always working with a medical provider because it depends on what the issue is. If it's estrogen dominance, we know there's good literature on cruciferous vegetables helping to detox that. There's also supplements like calcium D-glucarate, but you don't want to just jump into that without the medical guidance because you could also, suppress your estrogen if that's not actually the case. Let's say you are getting into like perimenopause and you see that your progesterone is, declining. Maybe considering a bioidentical progesterone. There's also, some potential other interventions, like there's some yam creams, more natural ways, but it's really important to always be thinking of this through, a medical lens.
Yeah. And then with fertility, I know you talk a lot about optimizing fertility. Is there anything that you do take for that?
Yeah, I mean, so I have an entire video on YouTube on the whole thing, which is about an hour, so I won't go into all the
Yeah.
details. And my husband and I haven't started trying yet, so the only way to know fertility is to actually try. But I think that there are interesting things that we can do beforehand. So first of all, I really like to have the data. So I think having an AMH, it by no means, so anti-Müllerian hormone, it's essentially a measurement of ovarian reserves. But I want to be really clear that just if you get a low AMH, it by no means means that you can't have children. You only need one egg and many, many women do. But for me, I'm a big planner. So I wanted to know my AMH, in my, I think I got my first one when I was 27. So understanding that is a good kind of just predictor of what you might want to consider moving forward. From there, I think optimizing for me as many labs as possible. Obviously, our gut microbiome, because it influences every single area of our health, including our hormones, including our skin. Our immune system is mostly housed there. It houses most of our dopamine. So, working on gut health, I think, is a big one. And this is if you want to really like take the time. I also want to say if you want to have a baby, you should just try, But if you want to do all the things that we know that we can optimize gut health, we also, might want to consider optimizing biological age, reversing it a little bit if possible. We of course want to make sure our hormones are in a good place. I also really like micronutrient testing. So probably a lot of people in the audience, like I have done in the past, you see a supplement on Instagram and you're like, oh my gosh, I need that supplement. Well, instead of doing that, instead of spending a lot of resources on all those supplements, if you do a test called a micronutrient test, it's going to tell you cellular and serum levels of your actual nutrients. So then I supplement based on what I need. So there's a lab in the U.S. called NutriEval or Vibrant Wellness, where you can actually, if you guys do this once a year, I mean, it'll streamline all of your supplementation at least once a year. Twice is better. But then you can also amend your diet to get more. Let's say you're low in vitamin C, you can introduce more citrus fruits. It can be simple. It doesn't have to be supplementation. But I think optimizing those nutrients the best possible is really important, because we also know when you're growing a human being, it's going to really deplete those nutrients. I will say I'm very excited because we have very little data on what actually occurs in a woman's body when she's going through pregnancy. So I intend on, for my first pregnancy, doing all the labs that I do at probably 3 or 4x the rate, so we have a much better idea of what's happening with our bioage, what's happening with our gut health, what is happening with our telomeres, what's going on with our hormones exactly, what's happening with our micronutrients. So really understanding these, I'm excited to put that data out, because as crazy as it is that we're living in 2025, we just simply don't have it. So
Amazing.
yeah, and there's also a little bit, they say, the golden window. So that 3 months prior for both men and women, if you do want to think about that, it would be a great time. So there's also like male prenatals. I've had my husband on one for quite some time, but male prenatal is really great. Really optimizing the diet, stopping smoking any mind altering substances like marijuana, THC, things like that. Of course, avoiding alcohol would be really great, especially during that 3 months preconception.
Okay.
So,
Amazing.
And obviously, you just talked about testing for pregnancy, but you obviously do a lot of different lab tests. Which ones do you recommend for people?
yeah, I think, baseline, let's start with if you can get them from your doctor, and that's all that you can do, I would say make sure you show up to that appointment twice a year. Get those labs. Honestly, toss it in Chat GPT, ask what the optimal values are. Always get it double checked by a medical provider because it can hallucinate. But I will say, after, running a clinic for many years and seeing the protocols from the docs and seeing the analysis, Chat GPT and these AI platforms are pretty dang good. So, I mean, I think it's going to help democratize the longevity functional medicine space, because let's be honest, it can be really expensive. It can be really difficult to even find a great doctor. So now you can get a whole list of questions to ask your doctor when you see them. You can run your labs through there and then bring questions. So I think baseline panel for sure, minimum. If you want to go beyond that, I would say an advanced longevity panel. So looking at more, I think, important lipids. So like an NMR panel for cardiovascular health is really great. I think we're looking at an in-depth hormone panel, of course. I also look at all the, IL-6, the HSCRP, these inflammation markers are really important, adding on something like ferritin. And on my protocol, I won't rattle off every lab, but if you go to protocol.kaylabarnes.com, it has every single lab value that I test and what I'm looking for in all of the different types of tests. After that, I would say gut test, because the gut is the foundation of health. So again, dopamine, your immune system, your hormones, your skin health. If you improve the gut, I've seen so many times, and I've also seen it in myself, it can improve so many other metrics. We talked about the nutrient testing, right? Well, if your gut is compromised, if you have leaky gut, you're actually not going to absorb the nutrients that you're consuming as well as you could. So I think gut testing is next. A few other tests that I like are the total toxin test. I also think it's really interesting, these liquid biopsies. So this is a cancer detection test. So it can detect cancer at stage 0. So it's the cell free DNA that can be emitted. It's just a blood test, really simple.
And where would you find? I've not heard of these. Where would someone find these?
Well, the company that I use, it's in the States for sure, but I can also ask Health if they can make a recommendation for one here. It is called the Grail Liquid Biopsy. So the company is Grail. And I think that gives me peace of mind, and then I combine that with a full body MRI once a year. We have Prenuvo here. Do you guys have Prenuvo out here? Yeah, okay, Prenuvo. So that's a full body MRI. Love to do that. And it also depends on what is your family history. Do you have a family history of cardiovascular disease? Then you're really going to want to, hone in on that. You might want to get a calcium score early. There's a very cool, new age. It's called a soft plaque analysis. So this not only looks at the calcium score and the calcified plaques, but it actually looks at the soft plaques. So you can do something about this before those plaques become calcified. So that's another really cool add-on. Yeah. And then some of the fun ones are like bioage. I'm still waiting to see where the data goes on this. honestly, if you were to invest, I think it's about $700 in a test, I would probably maybe look at grip strength, VO2 max, and gait speed instead. You can also do a phenotypic age. So you just take a few of your own blood markers, look up phenotypic age, and then it can give you a speed of aging and it can give you a bio age based on those few biomarkers. So that can be really helpful. But I think doing something like an advanced, something a little bit more actionable would be the recommendation. Yeah. Yeah. And grip strength. How many people in here know their grip strength? Few. Okay.
We were actually at another event the other day, and Natalie was literally saying, "Kayla says you need to test your grip strength." I haven't done it yet, but I need to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, grip strength is like a gold standard predictor, I will say I have about 100 pounds of grip strength, so it's quite awkward when men come over the house and they do the grip strength, and I look at my husband, and they're like, "Is this good?" I'm like, "I don't know what to say because it's the same as mine."
But say if you had a weak grip strength, what does that mean?
Yeah,
What do you
so
do?
grip strength is a proxy. Yeah, and please no one just use those hand training devices because you're totally cheating yourself. So grip strength is a proxy to overall muscle mass and strength. So it means you got to get into the gym and train more, build up more muscle mass. So
So are there any differences in how women should interpret their blood work in comparison to men?
yeah. Well, in general, I want to talk about blood work interpretations as a whole. So we know that there's these standard ranges, right? And most standard ranges are developed by the individuals that go to the labs. And who typically goes to the labs? It's usually sick and elderly people, right? So I, in no world, want to benchmark myself against these standard ranges. They're also massive. So as long as you fall within that standard range, things are usually boxes ticked and you're usually on your way. So I look for the optimal ranges. For women and men, there are quite a few nuances. Like there could be small deviations. There's, I think, about a 50-point difference low on the lower side for women for a number called ferritin, for example. But obviously, the bulk of it is going to be with hormones, right? Men and women have very different testosterone levels, obviously, estrogen levels. So I think the majority of the differences in labs come in the hormones, but there are slight nuances in a variety of other labs that can be found in the fine details. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so where do you see women's health optimization heading over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So I'm prioritizing ovarian longevity at this point, and I have a podcast, and I interview all medical doctors and PhDs, and I've interviewed some of the best, women in the space in the world, and we don't yet really know why the ovaries age at double the speed of every other organ. So, for me, I'm prioritizing ovarian aging. I think that that's going to be a huge focus. I'm actually doing a protocol with rapamycin, which is a very popular longevity drug, but I'm taking it for a different reason. So, there's a new study. It's called the Vibrant study. It's not yet peer reviewed, but it looks promising, and it has the potential to delay menopause by about 5 years. So that's something that's exciting. But I think AI is really going to be able to help us determine why do we age. So anyone that's familiar with the hallmarks of aging, so they went from 9 to 12 to now we're at about 14. But I've interviewed, one of the top longevity researchers, Matt Camberlin, and he believes that we only know 20% of why we age. So I think AI is going to be incredibly beneficial in understanding why we age so that we can have a more targeted intervention. Right now, it's kind of like we're spot targeting, like, okay, nutrient deregulation, so we'll target that. Okay, obviously inflammaging, so we'll target that. But I think it'll give us a much deeper understanding. There's also incredible breakthroughs, right? So these Yakanama factors that a Nobel Prize was won. So basically able to take a older cell and turn it back to a pluripotent state, and a pluripotent stem cell can then become any type of cell. So it can become a heart cell or a liver cell. So with the Retro Biosciences and the OpenAI partnership, they just found out how to substantially improve the efficacy of that entire process. So that's super exciting because in the future, we might be able to get an injection into the ovaries, right? And regenerate some of that tissue. I think there's so many breakthroughs. Like we all talk about some people in the space talk about living forever. I want to live to 150. But the truth of the matter is that we really have to focus on those basics and what we have in our control today because we don't have anything better than what we've had for quite a long time. And that's a lifespan of 120. So we need this AI to really help us with some of these medical breakthroughs, which I'm excited about. And as I mentioned, using it for personal use. You have a nutritionist in your pocket. You have a longevity coach in your pocket. You have a trainer in your pocket now. It's much more accessible, I think.
Yeah, I literally used it the other day to find out about supplements. It was like, can you recommend the best non-toxic, product? And it
Yeah.
gave me one. It's amazing. So circling back to nutrition, can you break down like what your nutrition looks like day to day
Yeah.
and what
I
your
mean,
favorite meals are?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've made this topic incredibly complicated, right? Either there's vegan, there's keto, there's carnivore. But I do what is most science backed. So the Mediterranean diet is the most science backed diet for longevity, and it's really just focusing on whole foods. Like I'm not sure how much ultra processed foods have taken hold over here, but it is just absolutely insane. In the U.S., it's about 70% of individuals' diets. It's wild. These ultra processed foods are in no way health promoting. I call them like food like substances, right? Like it's not real food. So to take away all the confusion, let's talk about the principles. So single ingredient whole food. So I eat a lot of salmon, wild caught salmon. We do have to be a little bit concerned with the heavy metal and microplastic levels in fish. I also test my microplastic levels,
And
etc.
also, I keep hearing about parasites in salmon as well. What's your view on that?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, I mean, I don't think all seafood has parasites, but I also don't tend to eat too much raw fish, because then you potentially could. But if you're doing the gut testing, you're going to find out if you have a parasite. I've only had one out of all the gut tests. I did have a parasite after travel. This was probably 4 years ago. Quickly eradicated it, but I'm very glad that I did because it was starting to produce some. It was increasing my calprotectin, which is a measurement of inflammation in the gut. So gut testing is important. So lots of salmon, very basic. Fermented foods are absolutely amazing. I've been trying to aim for 30 to 50 plant species per week. So that sounds kind of wild, but herbs count, spices count. So like turmeric, cumin, but getting that diversity is so incredibly beneficial for the gut. And we also know that all the colors can benefit different systems. Like, I interviewed Deanna Minich the other day, and she has a PhD just on deep nutrition. And she was explaining, reds are great for reducing inflammation. So red foods. So looking at nutrition from that perspective and from a micronutrient perspective. So I do that test, the micronutrient test, but you can also use an app called Chronometer, and that's going to show you not only your macros, so like protein, fat, carbs, etc., but it'll show your micronutrients. And it's a great way to plug your diet in and then be able to actually identify, are we getting enough of our vitamins and minerals from our food? So it's at least like it's a easy and I think a free trial that you can get some of that information. But keeping it easy, I eat 3 meals and I'm always focused on protein. So there can be some wild protein recommendations. I think it's important for us to have both the mTOR pathway, which is that growth phase, which is high protein and building muscle. But then on days I'm lifting a little bit less intense, I do dial back the protein. So I go between about zero point 0.6 grams per pound of body weight. And I'm very sorry, I don't know the kilograms, but we can get that info. And then I go up to about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight on heavier lifting days. But we know that protein is so satiating. So if you build your meals around that, you have so many less cravings. But I have a pre-workout coffee I have collagen, creatine, and protein powder, and then colostrum in my morning coffee. And then I have my breakfast, and then I have my dinner at about 3 p.m. We do know for sure you don't need to eat dinner at 4 p.m., but we know that at least 2 to 3 hours prior to bed, again, helps to, because food and light is a signal. So if you're eating at 7 or 8 p.m., it's going to signal to your body it's not time to go to bed, and you won't have that melatonin release. Also, when you're digesting food, you will stay out of those deeper stages of sleep. So, with sleep, we want to be prioritizing getting at least an hour and a half of both deep and REM sleep, and that can take away. So, minimum of 2 to 3 hours prior to bed.
Can I quickly ask which brands of colostrum and creatine everything you use?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Thorn in general. So I think most of my recommendations are there. I really do like practitioner grade supplements. I really caution anyone from just purchasing them off Amazon. They're oftentimes not tested. And we see a lot of these like consumer reports coming out, right? These creatine gummies. And sorry if anyone has creatine gummies here, but the amount of creatine that's being promoted versus the amount of creatine that's actually there, we need to be asking. I mean, we should ask companies for their COAs. We should ask for their data, because if we're going to be investing in products, we want to make sure we're getting what we're paying for and that it's also not harming our health. So I think Thorne, Metagenics, a lot of these practitioner grade designs for health are all great companies. So that's mostly what I go for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And what's your view on fasting for women?
Fasting, I mean, I think that we're not meant to eat all the time, right? So, time restricted eating, obviously, I do since I'm stopping at 4 p.m. I think that, again, if we go back to this idea of syncing, it could be more beneficial during that follicular phase when we're a little bit more resilient. But again, I think it's also bio individual. So, if you're a woman and you have stress through the roof, then it wouldn't be the time to add on this additional stressor, right? Because it's going to be too much. But the data I suppose would say, or point to, not say, point to, that during the follicular phase would be ideal for fasting. But I think fasting in general is beneficial for everyone because we simply weren't made to be eating nonstop.
I know your supplement stack is probably very dependent on your labs, but what does your supplement stack look like?
Yeah, I think of it in 3 different buckets. So I have my foundational supplements, which I think are pretty widely acceptable for everybody. So I have magnesium in there. I use one product that has 7 different forms because if you're deficient in one, you might be deficient in many. There's a few magnesiums that I'll call out. So magnesium L-threonate could be best for the brain. And then we have magnesium citrate. If you are not having regular bowel movements, which is definitely a way that you detox, magnesium citrate can be helpful for that. Magnesium glycinate is great for winding down in the evening, but I take one with 7 different forms. Then we have omega. So there's some interesting literature on having an omega index. If anyone's ever measured their omega index through a lab, it's an easy lab add-on. But having an omega index over 8 is good for longevity. I tend to keep mine around 11, but there is a Goldilocks rule, so we don't want to go up to 12, or we don't want to go up to about 13. So, I think we're being told to wrap up. Yeah.
Oh, maybe
minutes
10
left.
minutes.
Got 10
Yeah,
minutes.
great. Maybe we'll do a Q&A.
That
So
was
finish
to
what
do
you're
a
saying.
Q&A as well. So omegas, the magnesium, and then a vitamin D. So vitamin D, I keep my vitamin D between 60 and 70, which is higher than the standard range. But we know that vitamin D is so helpful for women for potentially decreasing the risk of autoimmunity, depression, a variety of different things. But we need our immune system to function well. And then I think of my protocol supplements. So those are all customized only to me based on my labs. And then we have my longevity stack. So that is some form of NAD precursor or an NAD peptide. I'm taking several peptides as well now, but we have the NR or NMN or the NAD, however you want to take it. We have the spermidine, which can mimic autophagy. And then I do urolithin A or Metopure is the brand. So that's for mitochondrial health. I also do cycle in senolytics, which could be like a quercetin or something of that nature to help clear out senescent cells. And by the way, guys, again, we're testing, not guessing. So I've measured my senescent cells and then I'll know when to actually implement that senolytic. So,
I can't wait to listen back to this
I know.
episode with a notebook because it's been incredible. Should we open it up
yeah.
for some questions? Have we got time for a quick Q&A? Has anybody got any questions in the audience?
For Kayla.
For Kayla, not for us. Anyone? Oh,
Oh, I think they're running around with a mic somewhere. Yeah. So we'll come back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the knowledge you shared. I have a questions about peptides.
It's a little bit low.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
I have a question about peptides.
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts about injecting versus the nosa sprays or the patches?
Yeah. I think it depends on what it's for. So if you're looking at a peptide, maybe like a brain peptide, like Selenk, for example, if you think about the mechanism of potentially injecting and it being closer to the brain, to me that makes a lot of sense. And that was the typical way that we would prescribe it in my clinic at the time. I think in general, probably the most efficacious form is the injectables. Although I will say that I've also seen personal and clinical results in oral BPC 157 for gut health, particularly because it's working in a local area. I think that could be a good mechanism for BPC for gut health optimization. But in general, I do mostly injectable peptides.
I think there was a lady just down here.
Yep.
Hi. In terms of supplementation, what should we be looking for to optimize absorption in your supplements?
Well, first, definitely optimizing gut health, right? Because anything with leaky gut will not have the greatest absorption. I think the data on liposomal is good. So I do often take a lot of forms of liposomal and holding it under the tongue for about 30 seconds. And I would say outside of that, making sure, yeah, you're getting a high quality brand. And then they also have supplements in capsule forms that are liposomal now. And then some things, of course, we could do in injection if need be. Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Kayla.
Yeah.
One more question regarding supplements. The amount that we take, you take, do you occasionally take breaks in between them or you just continue them taking non-stop?
Yeah, so I cycle all of my supplements, with the exception of the foundational ones. So the magnesium, the omegas, and the vitamin D, I always take. But yes, I do cycle all of them based on all of my new lab work. So I'm not necessarily taking a hard reset from and zero supplementation and at any point throughout the year, but I am frequently changing them up.
Hello, Kayla. Thank you.
Thank
How do you detox from radiation, especially when, after a long haul flight?
Yeah, well, you could wear an EMF suit. You're gonna be the coolest looking person on the plane. That's one thing. It looks like a tin suit, but there's also cooler brands now these days. So I have some EMF blocking, like little leggings from a company called Juna. And then there's Defender Shield has like a little blanket and a little pack. So that's one way. The only way that I can really think, and I'm gonna be totally honest, I'm not sure how efficacious it is, but my biological dentist had given me. I'll have to share with health what the name of the product is, but there is a little product that supposedly, if you take it prior, it can help detox the radiation. But I think this is an important point because with a lot of these tests, let's say, a CT angiogram or some of these advanced imaging, we have to be aware of how much radiation we're getting. Even DEXA, I think the radiation is only about that of like a 2 or 3 hour flight, but you don't want to be doing them with different doctors all the time because we do need to be keeping track of the amount of milliverts of radiation we're getting, on a yearly and monthly basis. So,
Hi, thank you. So you've named a lot of things you do, supplement wise, biohacking wise. What is the thing that you do that you can say like your body is so receptive to that you just feel good in your body? Like your female body just feels good and you know that, it's more about the feeling and
yeah.
the feeling is kind of matching with the science.
I would definitely say spending time with my friends, I think incorporating we didn't talk about it too much, but, I work out with my best friend like 2 to 3 times per week. We recently started a podcast actually because we hang out so much. We figured she's an expert in AI, I'm doing longevity, so but spending time, with loved ones, same thing with spending time with my husband. I mean, I get to really relax into my feminine. I get to just, embrace, the downtime and social connection. So, that's probably my favorite.
Hi, Kayla. I'm wondering what you do before a long flight to kind of prepare because you said that you can immediately regulate. So, is there anything? There's a lot of apps these days where you can kind of optimize your sleep schedule or do something before to be able to regulate quicker. And then also, is there anything that you do on the flight? Like, do you pack your own meals or anything that you can recommend for those long-term journeys?
Yeah, so I definitely still prioritize the healthy habits. So before I came here, definitely did my exercise, got my morning sun, did red light. I also did a balance or pro session. So you could just do lymphatic drainage. A few other ways to do lymphatic drainage also, guys, is like a rebounder. So a little mini trampoline, jumping on that right after your workout. That's really great just to get things going because we're going to be seated for quite some time. I do wear, like an EMF little pair of leggings oftentimes on flights. So that could be helpful or bring my little blanket just to be able to like wrap myself in it. And then as soon as I land, I immediately get sun and try to regulate my food. So again, that light signal and then that food signal to tell my body what time it is. So I slept 4.5 hours in the flight over, landed, kept myself up. And then I just went to bed that night and it was really quite great. Also, melatonin, I don't take this on a daily basis, but I do use a little bit of melatonin to help shift me into that new time state. But we know that light grounding, making contact with the earth is really good post flight. And also, I never eat on flights. So there is some data around performance and athletes of having a meal on the planes versus not and having better performance. So for me, I don't eat on the plane. So I had my dinner prior to the flight and then just skip. So yeah.
Hiya.
I,
I have a question about the gut health side of things. So obviously with your gut microbiome changing all the time and it dictating a lot, like the results of your gut microbiome dictating like a lot of your supplementation and
yeah.
going forth with like the results. How often would you recommend having your gut tested or doing a gut test?
Yeah. Yeah. And great point. So the microbiome is always changing based on what we're exposed to. But we want to look at some of the big red flags, right? Like, is that we're always going to have some level of dysbiosis or imbalance, that can be kind of more easily corrected. But things like leaky gut, that's an important one to look out for. So I would say it depends. I think once a year minimum is great. If you have findings, you would want to implement a protocol and then retest. So I'm doing it 4 times a year just to keep an eye on it. But if I have a finding, then I actually end up testing a little bit sooner just to see how the progress is going. But I think 1 time per year is really going to give you a lot of good info.
I have a question. What would you recommend for someone that's struggling with regulating their cycle?
Well, I would have to say you have to work with a medical provider because there's so much nuance that goes into it. The first question is why. I mean, there's so many reasons. I mean, it could be, everything from potentially restricting food, this hypothalamic amenorrhea. So that's one, a lot of athletes have this. It could be some sort of like luteal phase defect. Maybe you're not producing enough progesterone. It could be estrogen dominance. It could be so many things. So I can't really give any particular advice on that specific situation. But I would, like the Institute for Functional Medicine, ifm.org, I think is a decent place to start looking for a provider that can do a deep dive with you.
Okay,
All right.
thank you all so much. And thank you, Kayla, so much. That was honestly incredible. And as I said,
Thank
we all need a notebook. Thank you.